There we go. Hello everybody and welcome along to our race coverage. We're ready to go for the 50th anniversary running of the Nürburgring 24 hours here on the Nordschleife. I'm John Hindhaugh. Alongside me is Frank Behler. Frank, good afternoon. This is it.
Good afternoon. It's getting serious now.
You know what stops when the flag drops, they say. Well, we're pretty close to when that's going to happen now.
Yeah, actually, 45 minutes. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing now. Everybody goes on the grid, and I think also the drivers. I mean, all the week you're waiting for this moment, and going on the grid is the first step, let's say. And all the discussions will stop now. There's, of course, always a lot to discuss and to prepare. But then finally, when you go on the grid, you feel very close to the race and you concentrate on what you want to do.
If you're a starting driver, and you've been a starting driver here, Frank, what's going through your mind now? Different people I know prepare different ways. Did you like to be on your own and just get yourself into the zone, or were you one of those that wanted to talk to people? And
no, actually being on my own as soon as possible, as early as possible, and mainly Le Mans, let's say, I always did the start. And as I just said before, it's actually a very nice thing, because all the questions and what do we do, how do we do, it stops, and then finally when you get in the car, it's a nice feeling. And to go out on the formation lap and you know now it's gonna start, and finally you can do what you want to do. You want to race, you want to finally start this race and do as good as possible.
I often see drivers, Frank, almost looking like, when they're sitting in the car, almost look like they're asleep. Their eyes are closed. Just a moment of calm? Are you visualizing something? Is it just controlling the nerves? What is it?
I think what goes through your mind at the beginning, especially when you go in the car, it's the start itself. I mean, it's only a few seconds, and then you are hopefully in your flow, and you can do what you want to do. You go on your line. If there's not so much fighting, it's quite okay. But when you go in the car, or in my case, it was always thinking about the first few meters. How do you get a good start? Maybe you can gain some positions, and that's what I was thinking about.
We've got quite a lot going on today as far as Audi Sport and Audi Customer Racing is concerned. I'm just checking what's going on. It looks like the race at Zandvoort has just finished, and I think we've got an Audi that has won that. I'll wait for confirmation of that, but for the moment, on my timing, I've got Belgian Audi Club Team WRT having won the second of the Sprint Cup races at Zandvoort. There's a huge logistical operation going on to get some of the drivers who have been competing there for a couple of races today back to us here at the Nürburgring, including a very special shuttle. It's not your usual minibus. That's all I'm going to say about that. Frank and I ensconced in the studio then, beautifully, nice and warm, or cool when we need to be, ample supply of coffee and tea, out on the pit lane, and actually on the front straight as well at the moment, as things are beginning to get ready to happen outside there, is Alan McNish. Now, when I went out for lunch earlier on, Alan, I hope you can hear me. Oh, yeah, you can. There you are. It was pretty cold and pretty wet and pretty horrid. Has it changed?
No, now it's beautiful summer, where you can see that the sun shining. Just happens not to be here in Nürburgring. Circuit's very wet. It's actually really cold as well. But as you can see, the grid's lining up. It's quite cool, because we're down at the first corner, and the grandstands, there's a few socially distancing fans there. But there's a real atmosphere about it. There's a bit of a buzz and a feel as the cars are lining up. And later on, we'll go and have a little look at where the Audis are and how they're looking. But right now, John, I've got to say, it's got a nice feel about this race. But I think it's going to be a tough start, that's for sure, for the drivers.
Alan, I was just asking Frank there about, you know, what he liked to do at the start. What were you like at the start? Were you another one that used to like to get out the way and get in your own space?
Yeah, I used to walk around and just keep walking really fast with my head down, so that people couldn't stop and talk to me. And it was my way of just getting my head in the zone. And then once you got in the car, actually, it's the best place. When the doors shut, the helmet's on, then actually nobody can talk to you apart from your engineer through the radio. And that is you in your office. Right now, it's a whole load of buzz, it's a whole load of paraphernalia. It's people like us speaking and trying to get the little insights of what's going to happen. But in reality, for the driver, they're doing this as second nature. They actually probably don't even hear what we're saying. And they're just now focused on the braking, just for the first corner, which is about another 100 metres from where I'm standing.
As far as the weather's concerned, Alan, in some ways it's good news, particularly for the tyre engineers, because there is no choice right now. It looks wet, it looks full wet.
Yeah, it's full wet, but you can also, you can see here, this is quite a good surface because this is the Grand Prix surface for the Formula One track. And so therefore it's got good drainage. But then when you go out onto the back once you get onto the actual main part of the circuit, it's very different. And the cambers and the rivers and things like that, that'll make it very difficult. So as much as it's clear it's wet, it's not like last night in qualifying where you could maybe do a cut slick or even big risk go for a slick. I'm not sure whether you would still have the opportunity to pick the right full wet and to keep the temperature into it with that big, long first warming up lap before they dive down into here and try to overtake each other for the first corner.
I heard on your mic there, Alan, I'm pretty certain I heard some crowd noise, a bit of cheering going on.
Look over here. They're all sitting up here in the grandstands getting ready because, to be honest, this is going to be where there's a big bit of action coming down into here, not just on the first, but in quite a few of the first laps. And, everybody's getting into it. I don't think you come to the Nürburgring 24 hours unless you are an ardent fan. And a little bit of cold and a little bit of rain certainly isn't going to dampen the enthusiasm and the spirits. So far, my feet are cold, but it hasn't dampened my enthusiasm.
I was going to put my boots on this morning and didn't because I didn't think it'd be too bad, and I'm in the studio. Alan, we'll let you stay warm for the time being. Shout up if you get anybody to talk to.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm actually going to have a little wander up the grid a little bit to see some of my friends. Actually, one of them's on pole position, but he's driving for the dark side, for the other side. So I'm going to go and grab some other friends up here. I'll see you later.
All right, Alan, try and stay warm. Alan McNish there for us down on the grid. Never have I been as pleased, Frank Beeler, to be in a studio and not out on a grid.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It looks not so comfortable out there, but at least rain stopped a few minutes ago. So let's see what the tire choice will be. You were discussing it with Alan. I'm pretty sure it's full wet, of course, but yesterday in qualifying we saw that actually the Nordschleife was drying out very, very quickly. Yes. So it really depends on, is there the next rain coming or when does it come?
How much do you have to rely then on what the engineers can see on things like the rain radar? We know what an inexact science weather forecasting is. They have all the tools, but they can never be 100%.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the first thing is you have to see how are the track conditions out there, and the other thing is how precise can they predict what's coming in the next half an hour or the next 1 hour. And if they say it's definitely no rain, and you see it's just damp, maybe you might go for a different choice after the next pit stop. So it's all about communicating with your engineers, with the weather guys, weather people, and then trying to do the right choice for the next time in the pits.
And we saw, didn't we, yesterday, if we think about the story of the week so far, I suppose it would be tyre choice, particularly in qualifying. At the front of the field, we saw a wonderful drive from Luca Ludwig in the Ferrari to put the Ferrari on the front row. And that was a bit of a surprise, let's be honest.
Absolutely impressive drive, but everybody knows that, especially in these conditions, when it's wet and getting dry, the Goodyear tire works really well. So I was just talking to his father, one of my teammates, many, many years ago. And he said in the wet it looks not as good as it did yesterday in qualifying. They are struggling a bit, but yesterday definitely an impressive drive from Luca Ludwig.
And that's good information for a couple of our Audi Sport customer racing teams, because the 7 Car Collection Motorsport and the racing powered by HFG, both on the Goodyear rubber, of course. Audi have split between Goodyear mainly on Michelin, so they may be able to use a little bit of that information that they gleaned yesterday. Let's go back down to Alan now on the grid with the man who is running the whole show here with the team, of course. He's with Chris Renker.
Yeah, I've met Chris down here on the grid, just in front of the number 1 car, proudly displaying the number 1 car of Phoenix. But Chris, clearly having that and winning last year doesn't mean to say that it's going to be an easy run for this year. Weather conditions looking tricky. What's your prediction?
Well, it doesn't mean anything that we will cross the line with the number 1. All the focus is on tomorrow, Sunday, 3:30, to keep the number 1. That's
Perfect.
what we came out here, and that's what the challenge is all about. And as you mentioned, the very, very tricky weather conditions we have here, we expect them all through the night. We expect heavy thunderstorms and rain through the night. That is the challenge of this year's race. Besides, obviously, it's a complete atmosphere that's missing, and therefore saying a big hi to all the fans out there following us on the web platforms. We absolutely miss you out here. It's a weird atmosphere, but the challenge of the Grüne Hölle is still on.
Yeah, that's for sure. But also one of the challenges right now is actually getting the tyres choice right for the start. The rain and wind is sort of coming at the moment, but what's your sort of forecast for this first part of the race?
Well, first part of the race, we expect for the moment not much more rain to come, so we have drying of conditions to start the race off. There will be tremendous pace right at the start, because obviously we have a strong field of GT3 cars up front. And once we hit the field, we should be around about second lap, there will be less traffic because there are simply less cars on the grid. So especially the beginning will be of different characteristics than what we have seen the years before. And then it's the adoption, the quickest adoption to changing weather conditions. I think that is a key moment, not to do mistakes. And I honestly believe the car that crosses the line first here is the team that does the least mistakes.
Yeah, and certainly on that particular point, you've been at the head of a lot of different programs through this R8 program, but also previously with our Le Mans. And so you know 24-hour racing. What do you think is going to be the differentiating factors from the driver's point of view for this one? Not from the team, but from the driver's point of view.
Once again, adapting to situations. We have changing weather conditions. We won't be always on the perfect strategy. We will do mistakes. Maybe, you know, you're not in the perfect tyre choice and you have to find a compromise and you have to accept what you have to do in the car. It could be that I have to ask you to stay out 2 more laps, even though the tyre pressures are wrong, to survive, because it makes overall strategic sense. Maybe we have a better idea about the weather coming up, so we set them on a different strategy. And it's about acceptance, finding a compromise, settle in with your emotions to bring the car in one piece as quick home as you can back to the pits, which doesn't necessarily mean the outright lap time makes a difference for the moment. We have to survive, you have to keep it in one piece, and we have to be in the front pack making it.
Finally, are you going to be up 24 hours and living it, breathing it, just like the cars?
Well, absolutely. It's not 24 hours. I mean, we are up on our toast at Audi this morning, and hopefully we'll be up celebrating late into Sunday night.
Fantastic. Chris Renker, have a good race. And before I go, just pass you up, I want to bring you around here. Some little additions. You can follow us as well on Audi-on-track.com. Now, we hope there's going to be a lot of cars following and seeing that sign and disappearing into the distance. John.
Yeah, don't text and drive though, Alan, will you?
Try not to.
Or don't watch the stream and drive. Thank you, Alan. We'll get back to Alan in a little while. He's been working hard, and before we go to the start of the race, we'll show you some of the things that he's been going behind the scenes of later on in the week. Strategy, Frank. We touched on it earlier on, and Chris was talking about it there. There'll be people who have perhaps not seen everything we've done this week. How dare you not do that? But you can download it all, by the way. It's all on that little library button in the middle of the live page. In terms of pit stops here, there's a very complicated logarithmic scale that you need a slide rule to understand. So we're not going to go through the 91 different scenarios, and I'm not joking about that. It is 91 different scenarios. But ostensibly, people will want to know how long the cars are going to be out there. And you can look at it at time, or you can look at it on laps. It works out about the same.
Yeah, exactly. So normally in the dry we expect 8 laps to go per stint, and then the pit stop is 2.5 minutes, and that's the time you have to be in the pits, you know. And then, as you just mentioned, there's a lot of calculation going on, and if it's a lap less, so you have a different time in the pits and so on. 6 laps again, something different, and at the end of the day, I think it's not so important at the beginning, because first thing you have to do is you have to find your rhythm. You have to get everything working, and normally you stay out as long as you can. And as I said, it's probably 8 laps, maybe in the wet, maybe 9. We will see, and that's what we are going for. And then at the end of the race is a bit more important. To figure out when do we have our last pit stop, because in the last hour it's a bit different again. You might lose some time there.
And that's all got to be done on the fly by guys who are trying to make decisions about what's going on out on the track. The other thing to think about is this is not like a normal motor race in so many ways. And if this is your first time watching the Nürburgring 24 hours, you will notice that the pit stops look different as well, partially because of what Frank has just said there about there being a mandatory time in the pits, but also people are sharing pit garages. We've had in the past, when we've had a full field in the last few years, it's been capped at 170, sometimes up to 8 different cars, sometimes from different teams and manufacturers, all sharing a pit. Now add on to that the fueling is done in the pit lane, but is done from the same sort of pistol grip that you would fill your car at your local gas station or supermarket. And that means that you're going to be standing still for a very long time. If that wasn't complicated enough, remember I said there could be up to 5, 6, 7 cars in each pit. There is only 1 petrol pump per 2 pit garages. So you've got to come to some arrangement, because if everybody comes in at the same time, you simply cannot get to the pump. And when you're not all pitted together, if you, for example, had several different manufacturers or several different classes together, then that can cause a problem. The usual etiquette here is that the team or the car that has the highest position in its class will get first call on the fuel pump. So even if it's a lower class car, but if it's, say, leading its class, but you are somewhere around about 5th in the top class and 5th overall, the right etiquette here at the Nürburgring, it's very different, it's very respectful. It would be to give the lower class car that was leading its category first chance at the fuel. Let's head back down to the pit lane where Frederik Verveech looks like he's standing by. Yes, it is Fred, with Alan McNish.
Yeah, I'm down here with Fred. Now, you're going to be starting the number 1 car. I've got to say, I don't envy you. I think this is going to be one super hard beginning to the Nürburgring 24 hours.
Yeah, exactly. It's my dear colleague, Nico Muller, who handed over me the honor to start. But yeah, we had a warm-up, was quite okay, similar conditions. The only thing is we start P13, which is a bit difficult with visibility, the first laps. But our car went well, the balance was good. So in that perspective, I'm looking forward, but it's always quite dangerous the first lap to have nothing.
What is your strategy in this? Because it's a long race, but you're a racing driver. You always want to go for it. And so in that respect, do you play the risk or do you play the reward?
I think you have to adapt to the situation. And if you feel you have a good car and everything feels good, then you just have to use it. If you feel it's a difficult thing, then I think you just have to accept the situation and survive, because I think it will be a survival race at the end.
It certainly shall be, but I'm not going to let you get gone.
Yeah.
Get into the car, get into the warmest place. Let him get back to his office, John, and he said one thing there, adapt to the situation. That seems to be one of the keys for this race.
Yeah, and that you have to trust your own instincts and your team's instincts for that. Even within the Audi camp, there's a few people who've not raced here before. You've got to learn quickly, but there's no harm in asking advice here, because there will be people on the pit wall and within your driver colleagues here who know a little more than you.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's teamwork at the end, and if somebody is new in the team or does not have so much experience, of course, you have to give him a hand and tell him all about what he has to do and how it works. But this is something very, very normal. And the other thing in the pit lane, this is something very unique, what you were talking about. I mean, the atmosphere here at the Nürburgring in between the teams, it's definitely something different. You don't find it anywhere else.
So, Frank, I'm going to ask you to put your neck on the block now. What do you reckon? The first few hours clearly are going to be important, but I always think of them a bit like a boxing match. You're sort of just having a bit of a jab and a weave. Is it really just survive until tomorrow?
you have to keep in touch with the guys in front. There's no doubt. I mean, the pace must be there, and you have to stay in touch with them. And if you bring this through the night and next morning, the race actually starts. Again, weather forecast says dry tomorrow, so I guess it would be a very, very tough last 8-9 hours. And until that time, I think the main goal is to find the rhythm now and make sure you always have the right tires and tire pressure on the car in the night, and then just no accidents, get it through the night, and then try to attack tomorrow.
Would you like to be starting this race?
Normally yes, but actually no, because no. I'm definitely too old, but in general, to be out there for the start, it's a fantastic feeling. Yes, sure.
So we're setting the scene. Alan McNish is on the grid. It still looks pretty dark out there. If I look quickly out of the window, the Audi teams are beginning to do their final preparations on the car. The big problem I can see here, Frank, and we talked about this with Alan a bit earlier on, and again for people who are just joining us here on Audi Sport and Audi on Track, Audi Sport Studio and Audi on Track, there's a full lap of the Nordschleife before you get going. So heat out the blankets, fine, but that's going to be gone by the time you come through off the Dottinger Höhe.
Absolutely. That's very, very critical at the beginning of the race. Of course, you will see them waving later on Dottinger Höhe to try to get some temperature back in the tire. It's very difficult, especially in these conditions now. I mean, I think we have 4 or 5 degrees track temperature. And as you just said, after a few hundred meters, tires are cold, and you have to try to get the temperature back into the tire for the start.
So Alan is down on the pit lane. Let's go back and see how far he's got up and which Audi team he's standing. Oh, have you come to the front of them? Where have you gone to, Al?
I'm at the 29 car. I'm here with the car, and we've got the tyres are on it. But when you said about that, just one thing, I've just touched on them, and they are warm. They're not hot. They're not at the 80 degrees normally you'd have. We've now got to push to get off the grid. But what I see coming in, just over to the left-hand side, you see the flags flying. But also there's a bit of wind and some fog coming. So it's not just going to be about tyre temperature. It's going to be about visibility as well. 3 minutes to go. So therefore we're getting chased off the grid here, John. And we'll be living it live with you when it goes green at 15:30.
Thank you, Alan. You might be wondering why then Alan's only got a couple of minutes. Get off the grid, Al. Go on, hustle. Come on, I want to see you move quicker, Alan. He's a fit lad. Look at that, great form. Alan is down there on the grid. You might be wondering why he's only got 3 minutes to get off the grid if we're not going green for another 25 minutes. That's because, as Frank and I were just saying, you drive out, split into 2 grids here. We normally have 3 or 4 grids of round about 40 or 50 cars, up to a 170 maximum entry here at the Nürburgring. But the circumstances of 2020 have meant that we're down to just under 100 cars. It's one of the lowest grids, I think, since about 1976 when we had the petrol crisis, if you remember that. The grids came down back in those days, so it has dropped down just a wee bit. But the challenge of the Nürburgring Nordschleife remains the same, and part of that is that the first grid will roll out behind a safety car, and because there are still so many cars, you can't just do the Grand Prix circuit and come to green. You've got to go all the way around the Nordschleife, around the North Loop. That means that you're going to be out there for 10, 11, 12 minutes, Frank. What are you thinking about at that point? And normally, Le Mans is all about the finish. Le Mans 24 is all about the finish. That's when all of the emotion comes. But normally here, at the start, the spectators come right to the trackside. Yeah. They're very respectful. That's not going to happen this year.
On the track normally, and it's a nice feeling to be in the car at the start, seeing all the people normally in Brünchen and Wippermann and all these places. Unfortunately, they will miss this this year, but definitely they are concentrated on the start. What happened, and they wonder what happens in the first few meters. Get the tire temperature in the tire for the start, and we should not forget with this. just around 90-95 cars on the grid, the race will be faster as well. There's less traffic. Yeah? So it's very hard for the drivers. In the dry, it's definitely physically much harder. In wet conditions, you have to be more focused and concentrated. So mentally, very, very tough. And as I just said, it will be a very, very fast race, high speed everywhere. Sometimes, in traffic, you can back off in Fuchsröhre or Schwedenkreuz,
Yes.
very fast parts of the track. And that also takes some tension or pressure out of you, And but with having less cars on track, you have to go 100% everywhere, every single corner, and you hit less traffic. So it's going to be very, very difficult.
Frank's going to be around with us for the whole race. We've got a variety of guests to join us as well. And don't forget, we're still waiting to hear what's happening as the green flag is flying. So we're starting to roll on the warm-up lap. The Audi Sport Team Phoenix car sports the number 1. It doesn't put it at the front of the grid, but it does signify that that was the car and team that won here last year. Let's remind ourselves of the 2019 race here at the Nordschleife. Magnificent memories there, Frank.
Nice pictures and a fantastic victory for Phoenix Racing. Huh?
Is that a life-changing experience, winning here?
I think it is. I cannot confirm, I never won, but I'm pretty sure it is. I mean, it's the same thing with winning Le Mans or Sebring 12 hours or something. It's the biggest touring car event in the world. And so to be on top of that race and winning that race, I think it's something very, very special.
And so the cars are now rolling on the circuit. If you want to watch the international feed, it's side by side with us on the Audi On Track.com platform, on the portal there. We've also got all of our other shows available for you. I've just seen that Alan McNish has sneaked into mission control to warm up. We're going to throw him back out into the bad weather later on. We'll also give you a chance to see some of the things he's been doing behind the scenes. And we can have a look at what he was doing earlier this week before he got absolutely frozen to the bone, as he takes you behind the scenes.
Now, one of the most important places for the drivers when they're not in the car is in here, the medical truck. Let's take a look inside to see what goes on behind the scenes between stints. We've got 2 doctors and 2 physios here for this weekend. We've got Klaus and Andrea, the doctor, and also Lena and Pauli, who's doing the physio. This race is so difficult for the driver, concentration and also physically, especially on the shoulders. That circuit, there's a lot of corners, and they're in the car for up to 3 hours at a time. So you do need to have a little bit of rest and relaxation. And here we've got Nico Muller, he's getting quite old now, so he does need a little bit of help. But Nico, What's Pauli working on?
Yeah, the neck a bit, just to relax. After my 3 total laps that I've done so far, I need a lot of work to relax those muscles again. No, I'm joking. It's more about, being fit before the race, and 100% perfectly prepared. And Paul is doing a good job in getting us there. And then we're ready for 24 hours of full action.
And Klaus, you don't just look after the drivers, but you look after the total team as well. And now, obviously, we hope not to see them, but what sort of things do you have to do for the mechanics?
So the mechanics are requested to do also a good job like the drivers. It's a teamwork. Nothing happens without that everybody works perfect, and so we take care of the mechanics in the same way that we do for the drivers.
And now we'll go and see what happens with the other specialists, the other engineers. This is the parts truck. So if anything is needed for any of the cars, then it's in here. There's over 3,600 types of parts, and then there's the multitude of those. In fact, to put it in a different way, that's 2 complete Audi R8 GT3s, except for the chassis, just in this. And here we've got Reini. He's going to explain us a little bit. Reini, give us a little bit of an overview what some of these drawers actually have got inside them.
For sure, you can see here now we have really all the small parts, the tiny parts, starting from the screws, whatever they need.
And every single screw is got an identification.
You can see it here. I show you in the box that every little box has its own number.
But does anybody mix them up?
If somebody will do that, he will get in trouble. Okay. Because then I have a lot of work to do.
But we must have bigger parts than this.
Yeah, we have bigger parts. The main big parts we have upstairs.
Yes.
And the parts that we can also store here are, for example, these ones, like for the exhaust, like this for the steering. These are the bigger parts that are down here. These are the parts already prepared for the race. Normally they're upstairs.
Yeah.
But to make sure that we can deliver very quickly when something happens, we take the main parts here, like the blades from the side, which go away very quickly.
Well, hopefully we never need any of these drawers, but
Yeah.
if we do, we know you're here ready to do
We
that.
are here for that.
And you're up for 24 hours?
Yes. For one race like this, you can handle it because you're excited about it. Huh?
That's what we love. Every single part of the team is running with adrenaline. There's many things that are different about the Nürburgring 24 hours. One of them is the teams, they're not in the pit garages, but they actually work in here, in the back section. But if we're in the Phoenix garage. They've won this race a total of 5 times. Look at that, the big number 1 on the car. And with a driver lineup that I think makes most of the other teams cry. But it's not just about drivers. The team has got to do so much preparation in advance. Let's go behind the scenes. Just in case, that's the thing, just in case there is a problem, then these are pre-prepared corners, a quarter suspension. So instead, if this gets damaged against a curb or another car, instead of just changing one small part, they change the whole corner suspension. There's a gearbox sitting there as well, and other items are all pre-prepared just in case. Many other things round about here. The obligatory coffee machine, that gets used a little bit more than all the spare parts. Well, here we are in the pits, the actual part where a lot of the teams will be based. Just a little thing, the drivers' helmets are always sitting here. We've got Bortolotti, who's just joined Audi this year, but this man, Winkelhock, he's been here a long time, and he's been here a long time. He's a winner 3 times of this event, 2 more than his uncle. I'm sure that's interesting at the dinner table. But one of the things is that it's always a crush in here because there's so many cars. The engineering stands in the middle, but in here we have got 2 cars from Team Car Collection. We also have got the Team Land car that normally would be in this position, but an oddity. These are all Audis. In the corner, we've got another team, a Porsche team as well. So it's not just something that you can control. You can be positioned basically with anybody else. And so it is a very difficult and very, very busy time here in the pit itself during the race. But let's go outside, because one more thing that I just have never been able to work out is the refueling during the race. Driver comes in the pit lane, full service, he unbuckles the radio, puts it on, loosens the seat belts, stops on his march right here. But also, then the mechanics have to go quickly. And one thing, refueling. And the refueling is with a standard refueling pump. Can you believe it? they are sharing fuel pumps and refueling out of there. So the fill time is much longer than it normally would be in racing. Also, this is a maximum of 112 litres they can put in the tank, about 7 or 8 laps worth of fuel for the GT3 cars. And just to make sure they're all good boys, this is the fuel card to say they have prepaid their fuel for the race. So car 29, 75 and 3, you're all good to go. Get refueling and go fast on track.
Do you know what is really important about that? At the end of the race, by the way, you've seen that I've swapped microphones here. This is because we're going to do a bit of commentary for you live on the first half an hour of the race to see how it starts to develop, and Frank's going to stay with me for that. On the fuel side of things, yes, it's all prepaid, but at the end of the race, down at the race organiser's office, which is just down the corridor from where we are, there's a huge line of team representatives, and at the end, they are going there with literally fuel receipts that they are given by the official at every single one of those pumps, and it's all signed by the official and by someone from the team, how many litres they put into what car, and they go there and it's added up on adding machines, and then you decide whether the fuel that you have already paid for, whether that was enough from that deposit, and maybe you get some money back, or you've used a bit more and you have to give them some more. And that's all going to happen after the race, so 24 hours and a bit from where we are right now. So even when the race is finished, it's not finished for the teams and their representatives. As you can see then, the cars are out on the circuit. It is very wet, Frank, out there. We're looking at the Phoenix #1 car that is out on the circuit, and that car, I mean, that is wet. That is very, very wet indeed, as they're heading up from...
they go up Kesselchen.
Yes, exactly.
Direction Klostertal or, Moedkurve. No, it's really wet, full wet. So I think tire choice is was quite easy. Let's see how it develops after a few laps, but at the moment, full wet. But not so dangerous conditions, no standing water, that's a good thing,
Correct.
you know, especially at the beginning of the start of the race. And no standing water, but full wet.
So that's one of the Audis that we've got the onboard on at the moment, and you can see we've split it with the GPS, which is also available on the site here. We'll be keeping you very well across all of the action as it goes on. Now, obviously here, we're going to be majoring on the Audis themselves. If you want the full commentary on the international feed, well, that's side by side, and that'll be Johnny Palmer who'll be heading the team up. You'll know his voice from us at Radio Le Mans and Radio Show Limited. That is still the #1 car. I think we can probably cycle through one or two of the other onboards as well, perhaps. They're all in line there, nothing to be gained at the moment, and of course we're on the warm-up lap, the formation lap, if you will, so there's no overtaking allowed up to the Caracciola carousel at the moment, and into the bit of the track which I have to say, Frank, that I'm sure a lot of amateurs struggle with, because the bits of the track here up to the carousel, I kind of think I know it pretty well as we now swap to the car collection #3 Audi. But from the carousel onwards, there are a couple of sections that look very similar, and if you confuse them, you're in real trouble.
Yeah, of course, you have to know where you are, but it's a very nice part of the track. Going out of carousel, there's a very fast left-hander, and then actually going up to Hohe Acht, it's a nice left and right-hander. Then you are on the highest point of the racetrack. Going into Wippermann, maybe riding the curbs, you know. So in the wet, I'm not sure. Probably the second one on the right, they run it anyway. No, it's fantastic. I mean, actually, a lot of people say going up Kesselchen, that's where Nordschleife starts. You know, it's a fantastic part. And then finally, going through Pflanzgarten, the big jump, the very fast S's, and Galgenkopf coming back to Döttinger Höhe. So that's where you can relax a little bit for a while. It's actually, I think, going on Döttinger Höhe, it takes you roughly 30 seconds.
Yes.
So there is a moment to breathe and to relax a little bit. But let's see how it works. Now they are in Brunchen, actually, going out of the second right-hander.
It was interesting last night at Brunchen, Frank, looking at how the guys played Brunchen. It's the entry to Brunchen is actually really quite difficult, and it's easy to get too far over to the right-hand side of the road, and you get over the top of the crown of the road there. Going through Brunchen, there's a nice bit of block paving, and then the curb, and then some more block paving. But the guys at the front of the field weren't using any of that last night.
Yeah, because it's very dangerous there. I mean, as you can imagine, in the wet, if you touch the curb, it's very, very slippery. I think sometimes in Brunchen you can go over it and go on the concrete blocks, but the line was very interesting. I mean, it looked like not really wet, not really dry line. You know, a few corners, especially in Brunchen, the first right-hander, they went in the middle of the corner, second one as well. I'm not sure, maybe it has to do with the color outside. There are a lot of things out there, you know, the fans were putting on the tarmac. So I could imagine that this is of course very slippery in the wet. Now the small Pflanzgarten, the small jump.
So the car's now getting in towards the last third of the lap. The low cloud, the fog that Alan was talking about, beginning to blow in, and this is the time now. The last really, before we get, just as we get onto the Dottinger, I suppose is the last chance, Frank, to speak to the engineers. And now on to the number 29. This is the Land car. They've been winners here, of course, in the past, and windscreen wiper on now. Well, that tells me that it is raining quite heavily, because racing drivers normally, the windscreen wiper is last resort. You do not want to wipe that windscreen.
Absolutely, but there's also some spray, of course, from the cars in front, and it's time to get some temperature in the tires now. Warming up the brake, or getting really a lot of heat in the brake, is also very important. First of all, that the brake is working properly after the start, and the second thing is you warm up the rim and the tire as well, so at least the tire pressure does not drop, even if the tire temperature on the surface is not as high as it should be. But you have to try all these things now to get it up to temperature and keep the tire pressure high.
Frank, thank you very much for the time being. Don't go too far away. We might need your expert advice on any incidents in the early part of the race, but time for you, I think, to go and grab a coffee, and thanks for your company
Still
so
around.
far.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Frank Behler then going to make himself a cup of coffee and make himself comfortable as we're getting very close to the start of the race. Now, one thing, if you're watching the timing and scoring, that you will have noticed is that the number 7 car from Audi, from Car Collection Motorsport, has not headed out onto this warm-up lap, and that's because of an infringement in one of the early sessions. Unfortunately, Miro Konopka somehow did not see some double yellow flags, and he went through there at an increased speed. That, as you might imagine, for safety reasons, is frowned upon. He was asked not to take part in the rest of the meeting, and that car itself will be relegated to starting from the pit lane after the first group has gone past. And then at its first pit stop, which, by the way, they can't take until 4 laps have been completed at the start of the race, then there'll be a 180-second extra penalty there, stationary, before the car can come out of the pits. No matter what else has been done, that'll be held there for 180 seconds. You've seen it happen in other forms of motorsport as well. So that is going to be a disadvantage to that car. Now, the one thing I will say, of course, is I've just been able to check out through the window here to my left, and the number 7 car sitting on the pit lane on its jacks with no tyres on it. So we talk all about the 50-degree-Celsius heat that will be transferred from the heaters and the blankets to the tyres. But now, what are we, nearly 15 minutes since the cars rolled off the grid? So all of those cars will have no temperature in their wet weather tyres at all, whereas the number 7, once it is released from the grid, of course, it will have the tyre blankets will have done their job. Here we go then, for the 50th anniversary running of the Nürburgring 24. There are 24 hours